Good morning. This is the special meeting of the Village of Ossining Board of Trustees. It is Saturday, February 6th, 2021 at just a little after 10 a.m. I will take attendance. Trustee White,
Here.
Trustee Lopez,
Here.
Trustee Fritchie,
I am here.
and Mayor Levin.
Here.
Mayor, I turn it over to you.
Thanks. Good morning and welcome to one of the first of three public engagements that the board will be having over the next 4 weeks. That includes getting in, public opinions and public input from all members of our public, or at least as many as we can have. I just want to set some ground rules and put this meeting into context, if you will. First of all, there are panelists on this meeting, and that includes the Board of Trustees, our attorney, and village manager, Karen Diatori, along with another staff member, Jamie Hoffman, is our communication person who will be here to help different people who want to speak. She will be able to look at the hands that go up, things in the chat room will be looked at so that we can bring people on to the meeting to hear points of view about police reform and reinvention collaborative. Make sure you're in the right Zoom call, everybody. There's a lot of different public engagements going on, both in this village, in the town, and elsewhere. So we are here to really hear from the public about the police reform and reinvention collaborative. Let me put, I'm sorry, just noticed that I forgot a very main character here, which is Richard Brady is here from Matrix Consulting, who has been hired to help the village board collect as much information as possible from various members of the public. And he will do a quick synopsis of where we are to kick off the public engagement part of the meeting. We're scheduled for about 90 minutes or so. Just to frame our meeting, this is a result of government executive order that established our desire across all the municipalities in the state of New York, large and small, to look at each municipality through its governing body at police reform as we go forward. And that's all I'm going to say. Everything is on the website. We have been filling it up with information. We are thankful and grateful for the working committee that was appointed by the former Mayor Garrity, along with the trustees, to include members from the police, members from different areas of faith, NAACP, the LGBTQ Alliance, the Civilian Police Complaint Review Board members, amongst many others, and Richard can speak to that as well when we go through this. If you have any questions, if you would like to comment, we hope that you use the little hand that you have on the Zoom platform, and Jamie Hoffman will actually call out as we start listening to folks, the next 1, 2, or 3 people that want to speak. I do ask that you say either your thoughts or questions or comments, and we're going to try to go through everybody first before we attempt to go back to the same person again, meaning that we really want to hear as many people as possible, not just 1 or 2 people. And the chair of the committee will be me, so that if there's some questions, if we need to ask for clarity, whatever, just please let us know. So I think we're off. Richard Brady, if you can kick us off and bring us up to date of where we are.
I'll do that. Thank you, Mayor. And thanks to all of you for having me here today. I am Richard Brady. I am the president of Matrix Consulting Group, which was hired to help facilitate this process. And I managed this project after we were hired in November. So let me share my screen. I'm going to do my best to give a short introduction, 5 minutes or so, to help frame this discussion this morning that we're going to have. So hold on, slideshow, I'll play from the start. Okay, is that working?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
All right, so as the mayor mentioned, every community in the state of New York was ordered by the state through an executive order, 203 is called, to examine police operations in each of their communities with a view to reforming the police and making it more engaged with the public and more engaged with best practices in policing. It arose after the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and it represents a best practice that most communities in America are doing today. The process designed by the state and adopted by the Village of Ossining was collaborative. The board created a working committee, which was comprised of local residents, which met several times before we were hired and met with us several times after we were hired to develop what eventually became the suggested recommendations in the report that's been posted on the website. Subcommittees were created from within the working committee so we could provide some focus to the major topics that were summarized in the executive order by the state. So we received community input as we went through this process in parallel with working with the working committee. We had a large number of stakeholder interviews in the village and some in the town as well. We had 6 community meetings, some general ones and some focused ones as well. And then we had an online survey, which was incredibly well subscribed to, 850 almost responses to the online survey, and well over 200 people participated in the community meetings. And so in all the public meetings we had, the input we got was really extensive on the issue of the need for police reform, the need to be for the police to be engaged with the community and to be unbiased and accountable to the community. So in these public meetings, the one this morning and the other 2 that will be held later on in the month, the board will receive the input and will use the results to provide its report to the state on police reform in Ossining. So there are many recommendations in this report, suggested recommendations. What I thought I would do is focus on some of the major ones, which really are define the major initiatives that arose from this process of working with the public and in our committees. The first one set of suggested recommendations relate to governance and oversight. We had a couple of recommendations about changes to the existing CPCRB, the Citizen Police Complaint Review Board. And one was to have it be entirely community-based and not have the police department on it. That is an extremely rare feature of a complaint review board. It creates an issue of how independent it is. And so this is more in keeping with complaint review boards in New York and around the country. We think that its powers could be increased by having an outside investigator to review complaint cases against the police. Many communities do that. Some do it collaboratively with other communities in the region. And so that is one that came out of that as well. The next 2 sets of recommendations are more governance. And we come up with a suggested recommendation to change the village charter and the police act in the county to create a police board of commissioners that would function independently, but would have board representation within it that would provide more general oversight of policies and operations and will report to the board and the community about trends in policing and needed changes. And they would make regular reports based on that. We had an extensive dive into policies and procedures within the department. And the first one ties into the previous set of recommendations to increase the transparency of law enforcement in the community and having the policies posted online. And many communities are doing that today in New York and around the country. And it's an important feature in transparency. We have other ones within the report. We have a number of recommendations to adopt bias-free policing in policies. It's not unusual for bias to sneak into policies, and it needs to be explicitly stated that this is a goal of the village and the police department. Thirdly, to reduce the perception of cooperation with ICE, suggested recommendation was to modify the general orders so that Ossining Police Department personnel will not respond to an ICE operation unless they are specifically called to that location, usually because of something that has gone wrong in the operation, and not as a general standby. In internal operations, we had a number of recommendations. One is to have a more appropriate alternative response to calls that involve mental health issues, homelessness, and substance abuse, and create a crisis response unit. This is something that would be difficult to do in Ossining on its own, both because of the volume of the calls and the cost, but done cooperatively or collaboratively with the county or with your neighboring communities, and including private nonprofit agencies, could help achieve both the utilization of this unit as well as mitigating the cost. And this is an important feature to recognize that the police department isn't the appropriate responder to every call, even though they may be responding collaboratively in these kinds of incidents, but they're often not equipped to handle the calls as appropriately as they could. They could be better equipped by getting something that's called crisis intervention training, CIT training, which will improve their response, and either having one person per shift or everybody. It's about 40 hours of training to have the full program. There are various options out there to do 20 hours of training that could better equip them to respond to calls that involve mental health and other kinds of issues. Many communities, including some of your neighbors, have created a voluntary response registry that would pre-alert emergency responders, not just the police, but fire and emergency medical services, of situations in which there may be a mental health issue upon their arrival. And it allows a pre-notification, triage as it were, pre-arrival instructions, so that a more appropriate response can be made. There are a number of suggested recommendations in the report for new or improved community policing efforts. Importantly, one of them was to designate police officer liaisons with community groups, but also have a more meaningful presence in Ossining schools, as well as at major community events as well. Tied to the previous page on ICE, for whatever that policy ends up being, there needs to be a public awareness campaign promoted both in English and Spanish to explain what that role is to the community, because there's a great deal of uncertainty about what their role is. Lastly, develop an officer mental health program to include counseling with a teletherapy option and early intervention. This is an important recognition that this is an extraordinarily stressful job that can have a major impact on the service and to the community, and they need support as well. Lastly, in hiring and training, increasing the diversity in department hiring and promotional processes as well, to work with Ossining High School to start a program so that there is more local representation of police officers within the police department in Ossining, and develop a staged multi-year training program that includes greater emphasis on implicit bias and anti-racism in policing, de-escalation procedures, procedural justice, cultural competency, handling protests, and again, a crisis intervention training program. These are becoming mandatory in many places. So the next steps, the village board will review the suggested recommendations in the reform report and in these public sessions. The first one, as the mayor mentioned, is today, and it's the first of 3 that we will have. In addition, throughout the month and into early March, the mechanisms that we've used to get input from early on in this process about emailing us directly at this email address, ossining@matrixcg.net, and the 2 telephone hotlines we created, one in English and one in Spanish, that goes to an automated voicemail only, that only the consultants will hear and only the consultants look at the emails that are sent. That helps augment the input that we get as part of this process. And then lastly, the village board will adopt its reform plan in March and will submit it to the state by April 1st, which they're required to do. So I will stop sharing and turn it over to the board to initiate the input process. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Let's call this some housekeeping pieces and a couple of things that I left off. Number one, the village board has the easiest email to reach is bot@villageofossining.org. And that is if you want to reach us. So you have a couple of options, but bot@villageofossining.org goes to all of the trustees at once. I also would like to mention that starting last year when this process started, Mayor Garrity and Omar Lopez, Trustee Lopez, were the two people that were representing the board on this committee. And now as mayor, beginning January 1st, I took over in that role, and Trustee Lopez is still with us. So he is the longest standing member of this particular initiative. We generally put one or two trustees on all of our major initiatives. We spread ourselves out so that we are then reporting back to the board. So that is sort of the process that we have. And just again, for a housekeeping point of view, every municipality in the state of New York, from ones that have 55 people, 38 people in upstate New York across 55 square miles, to Buffalo, New York, with many students during some of its times, to Brooklyn, New York, that is always busy and full of people. All of us are in this together under the state request. Each municipality looks at its own police force by its own residents, and people are involved. People have businesses here, people who have family here. So my ask is that when you are commenting, suggesting, recommending, sharing with us, that you do tell us your relationship to the village and town of Ossining, where our police department is the one that we are looking at. So with that, Trustee Lopez, longest standing trustee on this initiative, would you like to chime in with your commentary?
I think we've covered a lot of ground. The one thing that I would add is, as people from the community are speaking, if you could please say your name and your relationship to Ossining, that would be great.
Thank you. Jamie? Are
Thank
you ready?
Mayor. No, of course I'm ready.
Good.
So my list is coming in alphabetical, but as people raise their hands, I'll be able to bring people in to ask questions into our meeting. So if anyone would like to raise their hand, then I will bring you over. And if we have more than one person, then I'll sort of read off the list in the order that people will be coming in. So I will mute myself again and then just wait for hands to come up. I don't know if there's, Richard, if you want to answer some frequently asked questions or anything like that in the meantime while we're waiting. Oh, actually, we did get one. And please accept my apologies if I say your name incorrectly. So the first person is Acacia Muriello. I will be bringing you over, and then next will be Gretchen. So hang tight.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, okay, thanks for the opportunity. So first, just chiming in, I've had very positive experiences with Ossining Police. Haven't had very many experiences with them. But I do hope, I don't know, what all is going on behind the scenes, but I would hope that especially the recommendation about removing the police from the civilian complaint review board would be sort of an easy thing to accomplish. Again, I think that, overwhelmingly, it seems like the organization is doing a great job, but that seems like a pretty simple and straightforward thing, we could do to improve perception, and relations, just to, avoid even the appearance of, there being conflict or, people not feeling comfortable coming forward and things like that if there are issues. And I participated in some of the earlier sessions, and people definitely brought up some things that were pretty egregious. I hope they weren't common experiences. And there does need to be a safe place for people to address those things without feeling intimidated. That's all. But again, overwhelmingly, only positive things to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Muriello. I appreciate your input.
Thanks. I'm going to take you out of here, and then we will be bringing Gretchen in. Takes me a moment, sorry. Okay, Gretchen, I am going to be bringing you over. You're here, Gretchen. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great.
Good morning.
My name is Gretchen. I use she, her pronouns. I live in the village of Ossining. And I think the recommendations sound really great. Definitely agree with the Civilian Complaint Board, in part because I know somebody who is part of one in a larger municipality and has talked about how constrained they are when they have findings to do anything about it, and how much of a presence the police has on the board and how much that limits their work. So I think that's really a great recommendation, even if it's not a common practice. The other thing I just wanted to flag was that I was on one of the listening sessions, and I think the recommendations put forward today sound really strong, but I didn't know if it's sort of embedded in some of the things. But on the session I was on, there were a lot of examples of youth facing harassment from the police, and it didn't feel like in the recommendations as highlighted, that didn't come through a lot. So that might be embedded again in some of the bias things and policy things that you touched on, but I just wanted to flag that as something that I had heard a lot of in that session and didn't quite see represented fully here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gretchen. Appreciate your input.
Thank you so much, Gretchen. Trustee Lopez, did you want to address the question that is in the, oh, actually, I'm sorry. It's just I don't know if you wanted to read what was in the question and answer.
Give us a minute.
Sure. Yeah, that Kasia forgot to mention that she is a village resident.
Thank you. So is there anyone else from our attendee group that would like to ask a question? And we also have folks that are phone call in listeners that we can promote. There's 3 people on the phone. You can obviously not raise your hand, but I can bring you over, but I don't want to put you on the spot. So I'll let the board decide if we want to bring one of those 3 over to address them. But
Do you know if they have a question or comment? Or
we don't. I'm saying it's up to you if you'd like me to bring them over to ask them, and they can say no question, no question if you'd like, but I don't want to put any of those 3 folks on the spot.
Okay, so
for now, we don't have anyone raising their hand.
So why don't we do that? Why don't we just bring them on if they don't have anything to say? But I would hate not to give them the opportunity.
So what I'll do is, since we can see we can see the phone numbers, but the folks in the audience can't, I'm only going to say the last 4 digits of the phone number as I allow you to talk, and we'll give you maybe 10 seconds to even say yes or no. And if you say nothing, you can stay muted. There's no pressure. Okay. The first phone number I'm going to bring over ends in 2514. I'm going to put you over. You are not required to say anything. So I'm bringing you over now.
Okay,
a couple more seconds, because as Rika says, it lasts a long time. The 3 seconds feels like a minute.
Jamie, are they muted on their side?
They are muted. They might be, if they're on an iPhone, they might have hit mute. They choose to do that. That's up to them. Okay, so I am going to take this person out. And then I'm going to go back. The next, oh, I'm sorry. There is someone, though, that does have a question. The name is listed here as A3, S-R-I. I am going to allow this person to speak. They're coming over now. Thank you. A3, if you want to unmute and tell us your relationship with Ossining. Thank you.
My name is Avis Srijayantha, and I've lived in Ossining for about over 35 years. And I don't have much of a question. What I have is a thank you, because back in when the governor passed this legislation, I thought that because of COVID and because of general inertia, this would not really be a process, that it would be brought up in, there would be some sad consultation, and there would be some measly legislation brought up in March, and it would be quickly passed and it would be forgotten. So I want to thank the village for trying, for putting the resources out there, and for the committee for putting so much time and energy and actually coming up with a list of what looks like pretty darn reasonable suggestions. I do want to caution that we can pass the legislation and then do nothing, so that there still needs to be a good deal of work happening after all this. And that this needs to, the energy needs to remain. I have to say, I think the police has gotten better in the 35 years that I've been here. I've had some reasonable interaction with them. The first 20 years were truly terrible. So mostly I have a thank you and a warning that we need to keep it up. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. First of all, thank you for the commentary. You also opened the door for me to really, once again, explain to the public how grateful the board is and everybody involved that we had such an active, vibrant, energized working committee. These are all volunteers, pull through all different parts of our community as best that we were able to gather, who were also willing to do the work, because some people would like to be on this committee, but time doesn't allow. I thank you for reminding us all. I think some of us have just gotten so used to it and not in a good way, that we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and getting everybody together and having a consulting group that was able to bring people together and reach out to people. You know, it's really, I think Ossining is a very active community, that we have lots of people involved in many ways. And I appreciate how long you've lived here, so that you've seen a change in the police, because oftentimes people did differentiate. I'm talking about police from 20, 25 years ago, or they would say, I'm talking about the current situation. That was really important for the consultants to hear. And it's very important for the board to also hear. So there is a lot of gratitude to all involved in this. And as far as keeping the energy, so I just want to correct some lexicon. It's not so much about passing legislation per se. This is a plan that's submitted to the state on or before April 1st that every municipality is doing. Some of the recommendations will be approved. Some of the recommendations may be approved but for a later time. And some of the recommendations may not be approved right now, with an explanation for why that might be the case. They might not be legally viable. They may be something that the state has to approve, not a village. We are bound by our own powers of village. So I thank you for also giving me the opportunity for going through all of that. And I really appreciate it. And I am in total agree, as is the whole board, that this plan is not something we're passing or not passing, but rather a plan that we plan to work with as we move forward. Omar, I always feel that you're the other member on this initiative, and Zoom is not an open sort of system, but the nice thing about it is I look at the gallery, I'm looking to see if you have anything to add. I'm not obligating you to, I'm just asking if you have something to add to that.
Sure, thank you, Mayor. Nothing to add, but I'll move on to the next question here. We have a few questions in the chat. So Sheila Speller says, please explain, define, and clarify meaningful presence in schools and the intended purpose. And this is coming from Sheila Speller, who's a Village of Ossining resident, homeowner, and taxpayer. Thank you, Sheila. I'm going to ask Richard, if you could, in the work that you've done with the subcommittees, to what extent you can answer this question. Richard?
Sure. Sure. So first of all, what we are not talking about here is more of the traditional school resources officer kind of roles. We're not talking about some stale, decades-old programs relating to drug enforcement and things like that. We are talking about more casual kinds of presence in the schools. We're talking about mentoring. We are talking about, there are some good programs out there for violence reduction for impressionable kids that are in middle school, particularly. And so the purpose is to reduce potential fear of the police and to make police more more engaged with youth in the community and more approachable.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
Omar, is there another one in the chat?
Yeah, I'll go through.
Yeah,
those
I
that
was
we
going
have
to
in the
suggest
chat,
that, please.
and then we'll transition to folks that
That'd
are
be great.
So next we have Shandy Speller. And similarly to Jamie, I'm going to apologize if I'm mispronouncing your name. Shandy Speller, a village resident, says, will the village board create and make public a plan for how they will implement the recommendations they accept, including a timeline and budget? So that's a great question, Shady. I'm going to answer, and then I'm going to hand it to the mayor to follow up. So while we may not have an explicit plan to say, here's exactly what the timeline is going to be, we may end up doing that. We may end up incorporating it into existing plans that we have. We have already a list of village priorities for the year. And so we may just roll that into some of those. There are other recommendations where it may make sense to have the chief own because of the nature of the recommendation. And so it's going to really depend. So we'll have to discuss it. That's not something that we have yet come to a determination for. So what the plan is going to be or what the timeline and budget for the different items are going to be. Mayor, anything to add there?
No, I think you said it all. This is recommendation. We have 2 more meetings after this. We have people that email us directly, individually. We are collecting all of that information. We will then synthesize all of it. We will put a plan together. We will then, as a board, all 5 of us, with the village staff, with the attorney, with Richard, think through how we want to roll it out, what we can do short-term, long-term, etc. The question about making it public is, frankly, even this is being recorded. This is, it's going to be public.
Right. Our next question comes from Rob in the town of Ossining, a 10-year resident. Has 2 questions. The first question, I believe Chief Sylvester is on this committee. Can you confirm he is supportive of all aspects of this plan? So I'll respond to this first question and then we'll get to the second one. So the chief has communicated his support of this initiative in general. We're at the point now where we're still talking about the specific recommendations. And so I can't speak for the chief and his support of specific aspects of the plan. But what I can say is that the chief is committed to improving the Ossining police and serving our community. And so I know that he stands behind wanting to do that. And so we'll have to get his perspective on exactly how you get there. Anything that you would add there, Mayor?
No, I think that covers it. Thank you.
The second question, can you go into any more detail about the recommendation to reform how mental health police calls will be handled? Has that plan been laid out, or will that be developed once these high-level recommendations are approved? I'm going to once again pivot to Richard to start us off, if you could, Richard.
Okay, thank you, Omar. Yes, and I think the second question hits directly at it depends on what the program is. Among the recommendations, suggested recommendations within the report, this is the one that's going to take probably the longest, and it's not just up to you. It's going to be a more regional kind of an effort. So it depends on what comes out of that process. So the value of it, as many communities have discovered in New York and around the state, is that police officers, as I said in my summary remarks, are not equipped typically to handle the calls that involve mentally ill. Clearly, there is an enforcement effort as part of a response, but in terms of doing something meaningful for the people, getting them involved in programs, talking them down, dealing with homeless situations, and is an important part of the program that police aren't equipped or have the time to do. They are, if it's not a situation in which an arrest is being made, it's a few-minute response and then they're out. So this is designed to develop more of a case management approach so that people with mental health issues, the homeless, et cetera, can have outreach to more meaningful programs to help them.
Thank you, Richard. So
Now,
next,
may I add
please,
one
Mayor,
statement
please,
to
go ahead.
that? In many of the conversations, we went really quickly through the one-on-one interviews that were also conducted. I heard the chief being mentioned, but please be aware that police officers were also asked different questions. So it is, we tend to focus on the chief because he runs the police department, but it's bigger than the chief as well, in that other officers were also asked, and the board members were asked as well. We do get a lot of insight into some of the issues that arise in this particular wellness, health, and mental illness conversation, and the amount of work involved with that. And it is bigger than our municipality. It's bigger probably than our county. It's a national issue right now across, as Richard said. So good that it came up. How we then put it into our plan, what we do with it, we will have to discuss as a board.
Thank you, Mayor. And although I always call on the mayor if trustees White, Ritchie, or Casada have anything to say, please, by all means, unmute yourself and chime in. So I'd like to next pivot to Joe. So Jamie, if you can help with Joe.
Absolutely. I got you.
And then we'll go over to the chat once again.
No, thank you very much. So I'm going to bring over Joe. I just want to remind you to give us your relationship to Austining. Okay, you're coming over now. Thank you.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
How you doing? Yeah, Joe Spinelli. I'm the president of the PBA here in Austining. And my question was if the if the board and or the committee planned on meeting with the PBA to go over this plan, because there are a lot of good points and there's a lot that needs to be gone over. So, sorry about the dogs. You know, I'm not sure exactly how many of our members were spoken to. I'd like to do that at some point.
Thank you, Joe. So if I can start, Mayor, would love for you and then as well. So I'm actually going to combine questions. I'm going to combine your question, Joe, with a question from the chat from Cassia Morelio, who spoke earlier, who asked, is it possible for the mayor or the board to talk a little bit more about the feasibility of implementing the recommendations listed here? So just to give you a sense of the process, we had the working committee come together and look at all of these different aspects of our police department. We had public input in many different ways, and it resulted in these recommendations. So these recommendations now need to be evaluated for feasibility, right? So from a budget perspective, what is the feasibility? From a legal perspective, what is the feasibility? From you just mentioned the PBA contract. From a contract perspective, there are many different perspectives that this plan needs to then be filtered through to ensure that it's feasible. And so we are now, as the Board of Trustees, going through that process, and getting feedback like yours, Joe, is helpful in ensuring that there aren't any lenses that we're missing when evaluating the plan. Mayor or my fellow trustees, anything that you would add, and then would love to pivot to Richard.
Yeah, I'm going to add something, but to your point, this board works as a team, really on all initiatives, which is why we're going back and forth, and I'm not just sharing, and I'm not the only one speaking. So I appreciate the good reminder, Omar. So I'm not asking everybody to speak, but I do want to give some space to my colleagues on the board to see if there are any other comments.
I just want to speak to Joe Spinelli. Yes, the answer is yes. In short, the executive order states for community outreach and the police. So, we will be doing something. You know, we as a board have to decide when we're going to do that. I imagine be relatively soon. I'm not speaking for the mayor's schedule, but yes, you guys will be included on this. We want to go through this. We want to do it right. We want to include everybody. So in short, my answer is yes, unless the mayor says anything different.
Manny, I see you, and thank you, Bob. Manny?
Thank you. Yes. You know, I really don't want to repeat everything that was said, obviously, but I think is essential for us to work with the PBA membership, because this is a community effort. This is a group effort. So we definitely be, just like we are having these public meetings so we can hear and we can better ourselves in understanding the issues. I think it's at the same token, it's important for us to have that direct communication with them as well, because that's something that we want to embrace at the same time. So I agree with everything else of my members, my colleagues have said. So yes.
I don't see Dana unmuting, so I'm assuming we're good. Yes, Dana? Okay, thank you. So in addition to what's being said, the most important thing for me, one of the most important, in addition to what was said, is this: sustainable plans and recommendations that work are the ones that have buy-in from all parties concerned. It's just the way life is. It's the way it is with all human relationship. Forcing people to do stuff, demanding that they do stuff, lasts in the short term, and people walk away and feel good. And then the next issue comes up in government, the next elected official, the next major problem that everybody then jumps to. That is not the intention of this board by any stretch of the imagination, executive order or not. It is absolutely the intention of this board that we come up with a sustainable plan that makes significant improvements across the board, short-term, midterm, long-term, beyond the tenure of any single individual. So to do that, I think one of the things that we have to do is look at the plan and use that litmus test, because that is our intention. It is exactly what we want to do, is come up with something sustainable where everybody feels, to Joe's point, to everybody else's point that has gone on so far, and we'll speak probably the rest of the day, and the other engagements that we have and continue to have, is how do you keep something sustainable over the long term so that material change and improvements occur year in, year out, and that it becomes a part of how one does business, not a checklist. We did it, let's move on to the next thing. One of your community members always reminds me, it's sometimes government works like popcorn. Every time a kernel pops somewhere, you all run, deal with it, and then you move on to the next popcorn that pops somewhere else. That is not the intention of this. This is a serious issue. This is a plan for improvement across the community. In my opinion, as a mayor, and I've spoken to a few mayors in our region in the past couple of weeks about what they're doing. I sat in a couple of community engagements in Peekskill. I have looked at what New Rochelle is doing. I've spoken to the mayors. One of the things that is of concern is that how do we learn from other municipalities as well? So here's a great opportunity. How do you come up with sustainable plans that make sense for everybody? So I do want to at least end with that exclamation point to talk about what I think is a point of view for me, but I think my colleagues on the board as well. Who is next, Jamie?
We have Leah Nelson. Leah, I'm going to bring you over. I want to remind you to first mention your first name, your last name, and your relationship to Ossining. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Leah Nelson. I am a member of the local House of Worship, as well as a member of the Ossining NAACP. I don't live in Ossining, so I don't know if you want to hear from me or not.
We do.
Oh, thank you. I think you're doing great work. I just want to make a suggestion that I have suggested it before in the public meetings, but this suggestion has been promoted by the ACLU as well as by Westchester County's Police Reform Task Force members. It combats the protections the police have through qualified immunity. The police department's contract with the village should be changed to specify that the police department would indemnify the village for settlement fees paid to victims in findings of police misconduct. Currently, settlement fees incurred by police are paid through the village budget, which means taxpayers pay for it. Now, I say this in quotes, but this change would make bad quotes a liability to the police department. It would make police less likely to commit misconduct and make fellow officers more likely to restrain and or report other officers in instances of misconduct. And I'm not saying that Ossining has bad cops or anything, but I think this would be a great plan to implement across the country, really, to keep police accountable and to nip it in the bud if misconduct is on the horizon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leah.
So I wanted to remind you that we do have those folks we talked about that were on the phone, and I will remind you of what I'm doing, and then I'll be bringing them over one by one. So the next person that I'm going to bring over, which again, you're not required to speak, but we want to give you an opportunity to unmute should you want to, is the person with the phone number ending in 6539. We'll give you a couple seconds and then we'll move you back over. So I'll be bringing you over now. No pressure. Thank you. So 6539, you're over here. No pressure to unmute. We just wanted to remind you that you are getting the opportunity. Okay, doesn't look like they have anything, so I'm going to bring them.
Let me know if you're done with that. If you've got,
we have two more.
Okay, and I'll go into the chat room and answer some of those when you tell me that you're done, giving the folks on the phone a chance.
Thank you, Mayor. The next one is with the last four digits of 8133. I'm going to bring you over for just a moment. 8133, you've been brought over if you'd like to speak. Okay, it doesn't look like you are going to be speaking. Actually, Mayor, I'm going to bring over Betsy Tomic, who has her hand up, if you don't mind, before you
Sure, go ahead.
All right, thank you. Betsy, I'm going to bring you over. Please let us know your relationship with the Village of Ossining. Thank you. Betsy, we brought you over. If you can kindly unmute.
Hi, I'm Betsy. I'm a resident of Ossining. I live on 16 Rockledge Avenue near the Stop and Shop. And I didn't understand in the recommendations why you put a 5-year timeline on to implementing all the trainings that the police force would go through. I mean, I get it that when you take a policeman out of his job to put him in training, you don't have as many feet on the ground. But I also feel that training is ongoing. It's going to be forever. So maybe you need to hire an extra policeman or two, because one or two are always going to be in training. And certainly everything we've heard over the past year is that, you know, some individual policemen, not in Ossining, but nationally, they don't know how to de-escalate a situation, or they don't understand mental health issues necessarily. And so I would think that as a village, we want to invest in making our policemen better at their job by putting money into it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Betsy. There's a couple of points in there, and I'm going to also hand it to Richard. So the recommendations being made is not by the Board of Trustees that we are looking at. They're recommendations being made by a working committee made up of more than about 18 people, I would say in total, unless I have the number wrong. And so we're looking at recommendation made by members of the community, not the recommendations made by the Board of Trustees. So that's the next step, to look at them, and that's what we're getting public input. So that was the community group recommendation. Richard, do you want to talk specifically to the 5-year issue question which was raised?
Yeah. First of all, I agree with the person who asked the question. We struggled quite a bit within our subcommittee and the working committee on this very thing. So we've made a recommendation for a lot of training, a lot of high priority training. And we try to come up with a feasible way of implementing that in some reasonable period, and triage it in such a way that the most critical training was received as early as possible within that period. But being trained once in this within any period of time is not right. It needs to be recreated. And your idea of looking at the staffing or even overtime implications associated with higher levels of training should be looked at.
Thank you, Richard.
One tiny piece that I would add, Betsy, and this is all with much respect. I would encourage the use of the term police officer as opposed to policeman, because we do have female officers.
Thank you. I also want to add the question of hiring more, not hiring more. Actually, we do sit down with the chief of police. We sit down during budget time, which is open to the public, and training. Police get trained on many, many things all year round. The idea that we may be short a police officer or two actually is a part of the whole budget process of not only paying for training, and the training isn't just done in the village, that would be highly inefficient. You have a whole bunch of municipalities in the county of Westchester and the state of New York going to various training modules. It's part of their career path. It's part of everything. We've always done a lot of training. We've always budgeted for training, and the chief and his team looks at exactly who needs to be where and when. What is being recommended is additional training on this particular topic, which the board will look at. I want to look at a couple of chats. We have one from Rob regarding ICE. So one more, please, regarding the ICE point. Can you clarify if the recommendation is to allow Ossining PD to respond to ICE requests for assistance, but only if requested? Or will OPD not respond to any ICE requests, even if asked? Thank you again to the village and the board for taking on this important planning. Omar, did you say you wanted to answer that?
Sure, I'll take a stab at it.
Okay,
So,
I was going to answer it, but I see that you want to answer it, so go ahead.
sure, yeah. So I think one important point to clarify is what the plan recommends versus what ultimately gets implemented. So the plan right now recommends that is the former of what you asked, that the Ossining Police Department does not respond to any ICE requests unless it's called. Not the second part, that it's not, that they don't respond even if they are called. So that's one clarification. But then what ultimately gets implemented is what results from this process, which I referred to earlier, of looking at this through many different lenses.
Right. I would also just remind people, I personally have always found it very confusing to understand the different levels of government. And when we get new trustees, we always have this conversation, federal, state, county, local, and we're under local rule. On our charter in this village, ICE is a federal agency of the government. Our police department has absolutely no jurisdiction, no say in what ICE does as a federal agency, and there are many federal agencies. It's often confused with request for assistance. The request for assistance is oftentimes by people in our community who call the police for assistance because there may be a problem. And then it's when we get a little bit into jurisdiction. But the issue of ICE was discussed in quite a bit, Richard. my recollection, I sat in on a couple of those, and we're going to look at that and have a conversation with the police and look to see what we do with it, as
Mayor,
we will with everything.
if
Please,
I could
Richard.
add something. So the prevailing sentiment that came from the input that you mentioned, as well as from within the subcommittee and the working committee, was not a bland request for assistance. It was predominantly relating to an emergency situation
Right.
in which another law enforcement officer was involved in something that needed additional help because of guns or violence or in some other way.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. I have Tiffany Thomas asking, let me read it. I am a Ossining resident for 46 years with one encounter with the Ossining police. If I could consider that if this reform is needed, they should train the officers to be respectable while they are in uniform. With that being said, if you're responding to a call, you don't have to come the incident with a macho man attitude with intent of making the problem bigger. Yes, we need the police to serve, but we don't always need conflict from them as well, which always happens in the African-American community. So there was actually, I don't think that's a question, so it's hard for me to answer. It's not a question, but I think that there was conversation about training, not only being about how one uses a gun, or even in the discussion about mental health and how that may be a case approach and what else can we do, as discussed earlier. This was just about good old-fashioned, there are people that are public serving, and the police is one of them. Retailers are also a group of people that serve the public. They face the public. Some jobs, you sit at a desk, you never see the public in your entire career, but this is a public facing environment. And I think there have been more than one request. So thank you, Tiffany Thomas, for bringing this also to the foreground, that public facing environments. In fact, you could argue that the entire village staff is a public facing environment. There needs to be more attention paid to how people behave respectfully of others. That is not to say that that is a huge Ossining issue or that everybody behaves, but I think the comments that have been made is, can we work on that a little bit more and have that as an area of improvement? So thank you for that. Dana White, I see you would like to say something here.
Yes, I agree with Tiffany on this point. I have, my family had one interaction which was disconcerting, where the police officers came to our door and for a reason that turned out to be they were at the wrong address. And yet their demeanor with us was disconcerting. We were, accused of being liars. They were at the wrong house. And it just struck me that, wow, it's a customer service issue. Like, I'm sorry that I don't know what, they deal with tough stuff on a regular basis, and they may come to a call with a certain attitude, but I mean, if someone had talked to me like that, in a store, or I would have talked to the manager about it. But I agree. I think especially for women, the hypermasculinity that sometimes comes with police force enforcement can be a little disconcerting. And I'm, for the most part, I have had interactions with the police over the 30 years that we've lived here. We had a break-in and almost a sexual assault in 2005 in another home we lived in. We were glad the police were there for that. We've had other interactions. And for the most part, though, I would say that I was satisfied. But this one case continues to resonate with me. This one thing, especially since I guess, we hadn't done anything. And so I do think that is something I don't, I know it's hard to change attitudes and stuff, but
But I think that that would be a good thing to try. There must be, I don't know. I'm not a, police officer. I don't know how the pressures they have to deal with, but I just wanted to agree with Tiffany that it can be disconcerting.
Thank you, Dana.
So-
Anybody?
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to bring your attention to the fact that we have 3 people with their hands raised before
Please,
we move forward.
after we do, if you could name at least the next 2 so they know that they're up.
Sure.
And when we're done with the 3, I would like to go back to the chat room. There were a couple of
Sure.
interesting comments, questions there.
Okay.
Please.
The first one I'm going to bring over, again, excuse my pronunciation, is Gunnel Rydstrom. Next will be Virginia Stillman. And then following that will be Jennifer Cabrera. So Gunnel Rydstrom, I'm going to be bringing you over now. Hang tight. Okay, you're here, Gunnel. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to just very quickly go back to the issue that Leon Nelson raised about indemnification. I would like to know, could you tell us what the historical record is of number of settlements that the municipality has paid for and dollars over whatever period is readily available, last year, last 5 years, something like that? I mean, I think that it is an important issue, and it would be very interesting to know what the actual record has been.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Were you done? Yeah. Okay. I don't think people in the gallery have that information now, but I think our attorney Stuart Kahan, who's on the line, might be able to look into that along with Garen Diatori, because they, between the 2 of them, have the budget information.
Okay. Thank you.
Am I correct, or did I just volunteer you for something that I shouldn't have?
No, Mayor, we can come up with that. I can just advise Ms. Rydstrom that certainly during my tenure, and I believe for a year or 2 before that, I'm aware, I think, of 1 settlement that involved an action involving the police. Most of the matters that come in through notice of claim or actions tend to be, car accidents or things like that with, bad roads. But I will be more than happy to be able to go back and look at that. It's just a matter of seeing where those settlements are and what they were about. But you can count them on one hand. I can say
Over a 5-year period is what you're saying.
at least, yes.
Okay. So not many, but we'll get that information to you. I'm sorry, Gunnel, were you saying something?
How many years is Mr. Kane's tenure?
Ms. Rydstrom, I've been here for 4 years. I can go back beyond that to just see how many, but I can get you some information. I'll get you as much as I can. That's what I can promise you. Okay.
Well, I'm not interested in, accident and things. I'm interested in settlements that were a result of police wrongdoing.
I understand, ma'am. That's what I'm going to try to get for you. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You got it.
Thanks.
Okay, I am now going to bring over Virginia Stillman, and I wanted to remind everyone that we need to know if you could please share your relationship to Ossining. Okay, Ms. Stillman, I'm bringing you over now. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Virginia, or Ginny Stillman. My mother was the only one who called me Virginia. But it's okay. I've been a resident here in Ossining for a little over 13 years now. And I just wanted to pick up on the diversity of the police department. I guess I've never seen in any of the reports, nor have I heard any of the meetings that I've attended, what is the current makeup of our police department? I understand there's about 60 officers. But I have no idea whether the current diversity reflects, our demographics in our village by race, by ethnicity, by gender. So can someone address that? And before I finish, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's worked so hard on this. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't have the exact numbers. If you ask me whether there are men, women, people of color, gender, the answer would be yes, and it's been a long time. We have Spanish speaking and all that, but the numbers to be exact, Richard, did you guys actually get that information? Because we'll get that information. The question is, do we have it right now on this panel?
We do have it, but I don't have it at my disposal right now. But the
Okay.
issue, in summary, it does not reflect. The most important issue is the need to have more Spanish speakers, fluent Spanish speakers on the force, and
Right.
to address the gender issue as well.
Right. It doesn't reflect now. It probably always has a lag because people, like all careers, get hired at a certain time. Our population does not stay at the same place all the time. It moves quite rapidly. In its resident and demographic makeup. And frankly, we only get that demographic makeup once in about a decade that we then learn. I mean, we know who lives here, but demographics wise. But it's clearly always a challenge across to have a clear and exact representation of a community. So we do have the numbers and we'll get those to you. I think the bigger issue that you're bringing is how do we make it? What can we put in the plan to make it more reflective of the community that we have now and the community that we think we're going to have in the next 5 to 10 years. And I think that's the bigger piece of this. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's what I think I heard in some of the community meetings and subcommittees that went on. So thank you.
Mayor, if I may?
Please.
Just kind of piggybacking what you were talking about. And yeah, we do it. The last time that that the working committee came in front of the village board in a regular meeting, there was a presentation, and I don't remember, but they do have they do have that, and I believe the presentation is on our website as well, and that should be part of the numbers. So we can definitely get that. So sort of in a way, kind of answer the question on diversity. And I can only speak for myself as a member of the board. I have been part of the of the interview process, and I believe, and I'm not, and probably Omar and Rika can kind of help me with this, but that was part of one of the recommendations. How do we integrate more diversity in our police department? Something that you guys have to keep in mind is we do. The way civil service works is like you have to be in a test, you have to be on a list. Something that to remind people here in the village of Austin is that we do have a local list. Because we have a local list, we tend to hire new hires. We tend to hire people that are village residents. So again, so those are members of the community. And the interviews that I have been part of it, I want to say that we always trying to look at the diversity. You know, unfortunately, because we have a list that has limited information or limit people to be as a part of the list. Again, that's a bigger conversation, sure, if anything. So we are limited to see who is best to serve our community. I can honestly say we have hired people that are bilingual. On my tenure on the board, and diversity as well. So again, not the diversity numbers that we probably look for, but you know, of the sort of like what the ideal is, but what is the ideal? So I guess to me is like I want to learn more, but also we have certain limitations that we can do. Either because part of the recommendations I believe that was presented to us, like we want it to be local, but we want the diversity. But because we have limitations on the list, it's like we can either choose one or another. And if we go to another, then we deviating of what we already have. So that's something that I think as a general topic, I think is essential for us to understand what is the balance? What is the balance that we need to create? And I think that's the forum right now that we want to create that balance. We want to listen to the community, not, based on the recommendation that was done, we want to hear the rest of the community, and we need to assess and what the next steps are I believe some of the questions on the chat were is like, what are the next steps and what the budget is. So there's a lot of things that I think we have to think as a village board, and I can only speak for myself. I don't want to speak with the rest of my colleagues. We have to look at, what is the bigger picture and what are the next steps are and what we need to do first to get to second and third and fifth point. Sure. So the thing is just of a working progress balance that we need to do. If that makes any sense, I guess. Hopefully I answered some of your questions on that one, but I guess I want to go back. We have a local list that we hire people that are residents in the village of Austin.
Thank you, Trustee Casada.
So I have two more
You have
folks. I have two more. So I was going to let Jennifer Cabrera in and then followed by Kalisa Nancy. So Jennifer, I'm going to bring you over. If you can give us your relationship to Ossining, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Cabrera. I live in the village and I'm also a member of the working committee. So I actually wanted to jump in because I think some of the answers to the questions that we've had about recommendations were not quite full. And I wanted to clarify some of those things.
Right.
So the first one about the training timeline and why we said to do those trainings over 5 years, that was a decision to try to make it a little bit easier on the police department to get through these trainings. Some of these trainings are really long. They take 40 hours. So it's not feasible to have the entire department get trained on all of these different topics, everybody doing another 40 hours, that's a week of worth of work within just a year or two. But one of the things that we spoke about when we were talking about this in more detail, and I'll say I was not part of the subcommittee that made this particular recommendation, but I've talked to those people a lot about it. One of the things that we were really talking about extensively was to have cohorts of officers that are getting different types of trainings so that even if everybody hasn't gotten everything in year one, a lot of officers have had some of each of those new trainings that we're talking about implementing. But just from a cost perspective and a work perspective, because some of these trainings are really extensive, it's difficult to get everybody to take them all at the same time or in a short time period. So we were really struggling with what the right balance was. One of the recommendations that we have heard from a community member more recently is for the village or for the department to look at adopting a train the trainer model, which is where somebody trains a member of the police force to actually administer those trainings, because that at least cuts down on the cost of implementing the trainings. So that's something that we've just heard recently, and we haven't had a lot of chance to look into, but it's something that I'm familiar with from a work perspective. I've done that myself. And I think it could be a really good solution to cut the cost because, these trainings are really important, and we want to make sure that our officers are comfortable with the amount of training that they're receiving, which is something that came through the conversations that Matrix had with them. That was one of the things that they told us they were hearing from the officers, which was that they wanted more trainings. Also, on the question of the ICE, the participation with ICE and under what circumstances OPD might come to an ICE call, we really put in that request for a response as a way of protecting the residents. So if a resident calls and says, I need help, ICE is here, they're doing something illegal, we want to allow OPD to come in and assist with them, which is part of the reason, if you've heard the chief talk about why OPD, I believe they observe what's happening. They're not really participating in it or even escorting them. But the reason that they want to have OPD there observing what's happening is to make sure that that bad things aren't happening. But what we're hearing over and over is that people have the perception that OPD is helping. So we want to allow them to help, without giving that perception that they're complicit or that that they're participating in that. So those were my only two comments.
Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate the clarification about that.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring over Kalisa Nancy, and then after that, we're going to go into the Q&A online. So Kalisa, if you could please tell us your relationship to Ossining, and you begin. You're coming over now. Thank you. If you can unmute, Kalisa.
Hello.
There you are. Now we hear you, Kalisa. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you. I'm doing well. I would just like to support the policy.
Kalisa, I didn't want to interrupt, but I am interrupting. I'm sorry. Could you, as Jamie had asked, a relationship to Ossining, just so we have it, if you don't mind?
Oh yeah, for sure. Sorry, I forgot. I grew up in Ossining. Currently I reside in Peekskill though, but Ossining High School grad. And so Ossining is like very near and dear to me. So I just wanted to support the recommendation for the policy to have ICE, not being in collaboration with the Ossining Police Department. And I know that it was kind of worded differently in the January 13th meeting with the Police Review Board. Chief Sylvester had admitted that there was a handshake agreement between ICE and OPD. And I just wanted to say that there is a reason for this public perception, even if they're not actively engaging or helping ICE. But at least from the viewpoint of a lot of community members who are undocumented, there is distrust within any kind of law enforcement or authority figure, because potentially if there is any engagement with the law on any criminal conviction, or even something as small as a traffic violation, that potentially could lead that person to become deportable. So already there is that fear and that intimidation already embedded within that relationship. And then also one of the ICE tactics that is used across the nation and here is intimidation tactics. And they disguise themselves as police officers to coerce community members into compliance. And so I think that there is something to be said about, the community members having the option and having really being empowered to call the police officers if they want them to be present. And yeah, I think that just really should be respected. And I really enjoy that particular policy recommendation. I think perhaps when we have the Spanish community call, there could be more conversation about that particular issue. But yeah, those are just my thoughts on the topic. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mayor, could I respond to that?
Sure. Yes, please.
So just a point of clarification, the handshake that you referred to, years ago, there was an incident, all right? And ICE doesn't have to tell you that they're coming. They can just come. They're federal. They could do what they want when they want. And a result of that incident became a relationship between our police department, or our chief, and the head of the task force, where when they do come, they give a notification, which they don't have to do. And basically they don't escort, they observe. And they observe for the safety of the residents that are around the residents that's being approached. You never know what's going to happen. And to have them just respond because of a phone call from a neighbor, they're driving into a tornado, so to speak, because God forbid something does happen and the person they're going after comes out shooting a gun or whatever it may be. There's no identification of the ICE people. They're just coming in, knocking on your door, and they're taking you. That's a whole nother subject. It's a federal thing. But I think the clarification, and I agree, it has to be conveyed to everybody out there that what the purpose of the police department's doing. They're not participating. They will only participate as a backup is my understanding. God forbid something went terribly wrong. But it gives them the identification of who the ICE officers are. Because if they're in plain clothes and they pull up and something's going on, they don't know who's shooting at who or whatever's going on. So, and I believe there needs to be more clarity with, the Spanish speaking community and around the whole community of what OPD is doing. All right. The fact that the relationship is there, I think is great, that they have the relationship because again, they don't have to let you know. They could just come in middle of the night and we have no idea anything went on. They could come in and leave and you don't know unless somebody calls the police department. So there's ups and downs to it. But I think once it's explained exactly what's going on and what the involvement is of the police department, that they're there for the safety of the residents. Basically, that's what the idea of observing is. And it's got to be totally explained that it's observing. There is no escorting. It's just an observation. So if they're going to a certain place that's in a certain sector, they'll get a call and we're going to such and such, and it's in sector 3, let's say. They're going to call a sector car and say, listen, I don't know how they describe it, that, this is going to be happening and, just stay in the area. That's all. So hopefully that brings a little clarity to it, and we will get this out, depending on how we move forward with this with the recommendations. But it'll definitely be out and explained to the public so they understand exactly what's going on. That's all. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Bob. If I could just chime in, and Calista, I actually was on a call, probably more than one, and not just in this community, but surrounding communities. So communications is always a challenge. I mean, people are married to one another and can't communicate for many years. It's like two people have a challenge, let alone large communities. You're bringing up the perception that exists, and the reality of people, documented and undocumented, is become apparently very, very clear, I think, in this conversation. It's also become clear in others, but I think here even more so. And we have to figure out how to communicate to the public. And honestly, and I'm going to diverge a little bit from Bob, sometimes it's really so challenging to get the truth out there that perception is just heavier and bigger a lift than one can imagine. And we have to do our best to communicate, or we have to change the way we do things. That is the point of the public engagement, is to exactly look at all of those angles and synthesize the information. Because what you've said, I've heard over and over again. And it's, perception sometimes just stronger than reality. It's not something I like. It's problematic. It's unfair to a lot of people involved. So it's something that I think, are all seriously looking at, because Bob is correct in his analysis of the relationship, but it doesn't seem to be getting through to the public. And at some point, the perception, I think, is just a very heavy lift, and we'll have to figure out what to do with it. And I'm gonna get back to this, I think, in a minute when we look at some of the chat room things. Is there anybody else that wants to delve a little bit more into this, or should we move on to the next?
I wanted to I'm sorry, Richard. I just want to bring to your attention that we do have one other person that has their hand up before we
yes,
go to the chat.
I wrote that down.
Yes, of course. So Richard, if you want to, when you're ready for me to bring them in, just let me know. Thank you.
Okay, just very quickly, I think the major recommendation for us is that this policy needs to be developed, and for whatever that policy is, it needs to be better communicated to the public for transparency purposes.
Thank you. Well said. Go ahead, Jamie.
All right, no problem. Thank you. Carlos, I'm going to bring you over. If you can please let us, if you could start off with your first name, your last name, and your relationship to Ossining. You're coming over now. Thank you. Carlos, you're here. If you'd like to unmute.
Yes, hello, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, my name is Carlos Panjon. I'm here, a lifelong resident of the Ossining community. Currently lived here over 20 years. And I have friends and family members living here in the community. And I'd like to thank the opportunity to speak and for the board here present to hear out the community, because it's very important as this process is nearing its end. I'd like to start out saying that the police department, I believe, has a budget of $10,330,000 for 2021. And as far as transparency, I believe that the current union contract isn't available for the public to look at. So, as far as transparency, I'd like to know if there's been any efforts made to make sure that the community is aware of, the ongoing negotiations that's going on for the union. As far as accountability, I see that there is a form to, file a complaint with the community review board, but I see that even those complaints really aren't made public. So if you could please discuss what are some of the efforts being made to facilitate more transparency.
Well, thank you, Carlos. Let me answer a couple of things. Number one, the PBA contract is public. It was given to the members of the committee to look at, and it is, I don't know if it's been put on the web at this point.
It has this morning.
So it's been put up because we were asked to. It's always been public. Anybody could have foiled it at any time. I myself didn't know that it was public, so it's maybe something that I didn't even think about. But that's what's great about this entire process is in and of itself, we've already all learned something maybe we didn't know before, or at least I have. So it is public and it is out there. And when a new contract is negotiated and settled, that will be up there as the new contract. And I assume the PBA contracts are public throughout Westchester County if they're public here. If you want to foil other communities, that's you're right. It's all public. That was, I think, almost a point of clarification. PBA contracts, while in negotiation, like all union contracts, are private because you have no leverage in negotiating a contract if everybody, including the people that are negotiating against you, get all the insights and all that. It's a negotiation. Once the negotiations are settled, it all becomes public. And all matters of negotiations are done by the staff in this village. It's done by the village manager on behalf of the board, and we then have input and we vote on it as our lawyers negotiate back and forth. Some contract negotiations take months. More often they could take a year, a couple of years, as you know, across all the different unions, and it's a union. So that, I think, just as a point of clarification, Richard looked like he was wanting to say something. I saw the body language, so I'll let you take it from here, Richard, and because I see that you want to say something.
You got it in your response. The contract is now online, and we had it as part of our study as well.
Right. And to the larger question of transparency, again, it's exactly like communications. I don't know what success looks like in transparency. I don't know what failure looks like, right? Everybody has a different perception of transparency. But I will say this, as a village, I am really confident that the level of transparency from all these meetings being recorded and available, even to those folks who say, gee, I didn't know there was a meeting. Well, they've all been recorded. I think with the exception of a couple of them, or maybe only one actually, and some of the subcommittee work where people, in the beginning, forgot to ask for him to be recorded, didn't think about it. That was not intentional, it happened. And then somebody said, let's record it so everybody sees it. So it started getting recorded. This one included. All of our meetings in the village are recorded, work sessions and legislative. Let me say that is not the case in all municipalities. We have a comment here about the chief and things that he said on some of the subcommittee meetings. That's because it's transparent. They're recorded from the minute they start to the minute they end. And so we've made great efforts to put as much and as quickly, and it's maybe not fast enough for some people, as much and as quickly as we can on the most public of sites that we have. We've also created recordings of even some of the subcommittee and where people in the community. And again, I know the word community means different things to different people, as I have learned. It could be all of the, 26,000 plus people a community. It could be different segments of community. But we've had different members who have wanted to speak with the board, and we've we're available. We made the time and we've met with them separately and 2 to 3 hours in some cases. We always try to get a couple of board members on there. We cannot have more than 2 because then it becomes a noticed public meeting, which is actually what we're having now. So I hope that explains some of the transparency. And I think in this plan, there will be, regarding the police department, not just government in general, more of that. I want to take the opportunity to also remind people, because there is something that was said earlier about the Spanish language session. That is going to be held on February 27th, 10 a.m. Saturday, when we think members of community are most available, not just during the workday. And so just if you have friends that you think would be interested, neighbors, yourself, please join us for that. And I hope I answered that question. And Jamie, we have one more before we go to
We
chat.
actually have,
Yes?
we have 2 more, but I do know that there are questions that were asked in the Q&A over 45 minutes ago.
Right.
So I wanted to, and the 2 people that do have their hands up just recently in this, just during Carlos's question, did raise their hand. So what is your choice, that we go to the?
No, I want to go to the chat because they went on for a while ago. So I want to
Okay,
go
so
to
I'll
that.
let you go into the chat box, and when you're ready,
Right.
I will then bring in Maita Garcia and Melanie Flores. Okay,
Great,
so
great.
you do that and then let me know. Thank you.
Right. So this one, I'm going to, I guess I'll read it, to probably answer Rob's question about the support of the chief. As per previous meetings that have been posted on the village, which I just discussed, that they're recorded and they're posted, seem very clear the chief was not in support of many recommendations being made. For example, mental health checking, the recommendation about not appearing with ICE, as he has a handshake agreement. He also does not, that was in quotes, does not agree with the recommendation about CPRB, to name a few. So I can't speak, and I won't, on behalf of other people. But to be clear, the police under the executive order is part of the required entity that is involved in this. And I think that is not only fair, but totally appropriate. Much of the execution, as I said earlier, sustainable execution of any plan that involves the police department should have police buy-in. That being said, let's be very clear, and I don't need to go to Richard because I'll tell you, because I sat in enough of them. The recommendations that were put forward weren't all immediately unanimous by anybody. People have differing opinions about what things should look like. They have different knowledge base. They come at things differently. That's why we formed a committee as best we can that represents a wide part of the many segments of our diverse community. The 5 board members don't have, in my opinion, and I haven't even asked about each of the items of the plan. I'm sure we're going to have some conversations that get emotional, that have strong opinions that we may agree on. We may not have a unanimous vote as we go item by item. We may vote in majority and not unanimously. People are entitled to have varying opinion. The support has to be coming from, it will come from the police and the board and other involved community members as we see it. We will vote on a plan. And the truth is that once we do go through a plan, that will be the plan. People don't have to agree with every aspect. I am 100% sure that there will not be 100% agreement by 100% of the involved parties about the plan that we pass. That is a given. The reality is that we will have a plan and it will be implemented because we're the legislative body, and that is part of our responsibility, is to make sure that we come up with a plan that is workable, executable. So I understand the chief didn't agree with everything. We all get that. It's normal. But now we're going to move on to voting on a plan that will be implemented. So, Richard, you shake your head in agreements. I'm not even going to pivot to you because I think this is a discussion point that we've been through. Let me just, before I lose something, there were 2 anonymous attendees. Okay, so that was one of them. That was an anonymous. I don't know who asked that. The second anonymous is about, okay, why can't we have a proper discussion as a community that seems like conversation involves dialogue? Many times you have all said this is a community process, but we just asking you questions seems like the only ones present or come up with answers. Okay, I think that's a good one, and asked in a different way. And I see Trustee Lopez would like to answer. Sir?
Oh, just so I clarify process, I'm just marking them as answered live, not that I want to answer them live.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. I'm happy to answer this question. So this is a point of conversation that the board has had in the past and as recently as yesterday as to how to conduct these kinds of conversation. There's a spectrum. There are conversations that are very prescriptive, and those are more like when we have our legislative sessions where members of the public get a set amount of time to speak, the board does not respond, and that's it. And that the purpose of that is just to get public input. The benefit is that everyone gets equal amount of time, so it's equal in that way. The of course downside is that it's not a conversation, and so if you're looking for a dialogue, it doesn't allow for that. On the other end of the spectrum, there's a town hall or village hall style event where members of the public and the board, sometimes there's a topic, sometimes there's not, but there's a conversation about issues of the day. And that is a free flow exchange, usually doesn't have too many rules. Maybe everyone speaks once before anyone speaks twice, something like that. But the purpose is to have a dialogue. Then there's something like this in the middle where we're having an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions. We respond, and then there is some back and forth, but it's somewhat limited. The benefit of this is that because of the nature of this work, already we are an hour and 36 minutes in. We have many questions in the chat, a couple of people raising their hands. There are a lot of people that want to get their thoughts in, and in exchange for not being here for 6 hours, we try to limit it so that we get as many questions in as possible, but we also respond so that there's a little bit of dialogue and some clarification, and not just receiving your feedback. So each one has, I think, a pro and a con, and we are moving to include more village hall, town hall type of events in the future because there is a space for that. But at this point, the purpose of this call is very specific, of trying to get public feedback, but also create some space for the board to respond.
And it's thank you, Trustee Lopez. And there's two more after this so that people could see this one. And if anything was forgotten and they meant to ask or they have different thoughts, there you are. This one I think is for you, Richard. I don't really know how to do this concisely. From Sheila Speller. Please discuss the recommendation in quotes, work with the village and police department and possibly nonprofit agencies to create a voluntary response registry, which would assist emergency communication responders, end of quote. So this must be something that has been recommended or is part of the recommendation. So if we can get your response to that, please, and please give an example or two. I'm reading these because the panelists can see this, but not everybody, I think, can. Go ahead.
One of your neighbors has implemented the program that we're talking about. Yonkers has a voluntary response registry, and the volunteer, for the answer what I think is one part of the question, the volunteers don't respond. So what it is, it's information. So that on a call, for example, on a domestic dispute or especially associated with a residence, that the emergency responders, the police officers, firefighters, emergency medical technicians would know that that somebody within the household had a mental health issue that the emergency communications center had been made aware of. So it doesn't get all of them, get some of them, but it addresses the problem which has happened in many communities where police officers have responded, not know that somebody had a mental health issue, misinterpreted the actions toward them, and with unfortunate consequences. So it's information only, and it's voluntary to provide that information to the registry.
Rika?
Okay.
Rika,
oh, Bob, there you are.
I did. Just to touch base, you know, I agree 100%, especially being a first responder back in, and I don't know if it's still going on, but we used to do this thing called a tot finder. And it was the idea, the tot finder was to be at the front door and to be at the window of where the child is, God forbid, if we had to get in there and stuff like that. And I believe, you know, maybe some way of implementing some type of program of different labels at the door front or something like that. So even if it's not, and again, it's all voluntary, and there is people, we do have notice of people that have oxygen in their houses. and things like that. And it covers everything. And it's something that we could maybe implement somehow, have a bigger discussion about it, how that we could do that and offer it to the public in a very simple way of, you know, you can just register and come down and pick up some stickers and put them at your front door in case the call doesn't get communicated, you know, and they show up at the front door and they say, hey, we got a mental health problem here, or whatever it may be, or first responders, we've got a kid in the house, you know, okay, let's look for that window. Where's that kid? You know, and, you know, that's just my little outtake on it. I don't know if we're leaning towards something like that. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you, Bob. I'm going to go back because these are not coming in. So Virginia Stillman, there are a whole bunch of questions here. Let me combine a few related to ICE. How would the OPD know the difference between ICE people or members from local fringed armed extremist groups? Okay, so again, ICE is a federal agency. Our police department has no knowledge about one way or the other who they are, what they are. They have asked ICE to inform them when they are coming into this community. And I'm being polite when I say coming, because they show up in whatever way they show up. You could look up all of the rules and regulation for ICE on Google when you want to do research about ICE and their behavior and what they do in different communities. At the end of the day, the calling, which I think is what all three of these things are about, and the backup, it's all, it's really about what the chief had stated a number of times publicly and then the subcommittee, that his belief and his department's belief is that they're protecting the residents from ICE picking up the wrong person, because they don't exactly take the time to figure out. They have some descriptions, they're supposed to have subpoenas, and they're there to protect the residents, which I think Bob has said before in his description as well. And so who calls whom, to answer that question? I think that the chief had described in a subcommittee that he is trying to impress upon the contact ICE has a New York State ICE group and an Idaho ICE group. I mean, they're all over they're a federal agency. It's not just a New York thing, and they have regions in New York because we're such a big state. And he wants to be told when they come in here because he wants to protect the residents of Ossining. The perception is that that's not what he means, or that's not what he does. And I will let him speak on this more when we also ask the chief, not in this meeting, but, you know, we plan to ask him as well about, in more detail about some of these recommendations. But I hope that answers a lot of who calls whom, because that's the explanation that was given. There was another one from Virginia Stillman, not about ICE, on the subject of demographics. Okay, that's not, I'm sorry, let me just get this back up here. Okay, anonymous attendee on the subject of demographics in the working committee. Currently, is only one Black male from the community committee. I understand that one Black male member is sick and may not be able to serve. Are you going to bring more Black men onto the working committee? So there are three different questions on there. Let me address each of them. So first of all, there is more than one Black man. There's more than two Black men on the committee. The committee's makeup is quite diverse of both Black women and Black men and Hispanic. And I don't know how to qualify everybody. There are members of the faith, an individual, and this is, I understand the question, but let me answer my own way. When the committees are chosen, when all of our committees, there are a lot of mayor's appointments of many committees. We have about a dozen of them. Then we have initiatives like this, and the mayor's appointments are made on behalf of the trustees. When we make an appointment, when I speak as the mayor, but Dana and I speak also as women. I mean, I'm not a single segment human being. I travel in many circles. I am a person who belongs to a faith. I am a woman. I'm a woman of a certain age, you know, all sorts. I'm an immigrant. All of those things make up my value system, and they make up my conversation when I'm on committee. So a person who represents a group doesn't just represent that group. In our opinion, when we form committees, they also bring to the table their value system. And a person, and all of us do that. And not only our own value system, but that of our family. So if we have children, if we have stepchildren, if we have any members of our family of different segments of a community, all of that comes to the proverbial table that we sit on. So just to be clear, this committee was made up of a quite diverse group of people. In addition, both Omar and I have sat at least one meeting for quite a while in a conversation with Black men of our community who've lived here a very long time. One of the, and I've said this publicly because it was all recorded, by the way, one of the more interesting conversations. I highly recommend that people watch it. And there were other groups that sort of broke off and asked and said, can we talk? Do we want to do that? And we all live here, right? So every member on this board lives in the village of Ossining, and we have a great interest in hearing what the community said. So there was representation. The last piece, so you're going to bring more Black men onto the working committee. The working committee has ended its part of this initiative in the sense that on the 27th, the recommended plan was brought from the board. And from this point on, or from that point on, I guess grammatically correct, the board now engages with the public based on the recommendation, but also based on more recommendations that might come to us from anywhere, because that's what public engagement is. It isn't just working with groups, it is also working with individuals. It's also working with people who may not like to be speaking to us or in groups in public, or people that simply didn't have time to be involved. Now that they see what's going on, want to be involved, we need to hear from them too. They too are public and constituents, and they too, I think, will want to come forth. I'm going to repeat bot@villageofossining.org for those of you, and any of us that you feel more comfortable with. It's our last name, Village of Ossining, at villageofossining.org. My case, it could be either mayor@villageofossining.org or 11@villageofossining.org, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think I answered.
Actually, Rika, I'm going to interrupt you here. We do have some people that have been waiting in the chat outside of this that we need to bring over. And then also, just while I have you, for anyone here that is in the attendee list, if you didn't catch any of the emails that were said, you can find everything on the village's website. There's a BOT page. There's also the police reform page. So you can find everything there. So I don't know that we need to repeat the emails again. Everything is there. So
great.
So you're all set there. So I am going to bring in Maita Garcia now, and then we're going to stick to the people that are going to be raising their hands, and then I'll let Trustee Lopez go back to the Q&A as well. Okay, so Maita, I'm bringing you over now. Thank you so much. And also reminder to tell us your relationship to Ossining. Thank you.
Hi, Maita.
Okay. Hi. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yes, I'm Maite Garcia. I am actually a working committee member. So I'm happy to be on this call, but kind of wish that me and my colleagues of the working committee were also visible to the call so that the community can ask us questions as well. I feel like Richard has answered many questions, but it would have, in my view, I think it would be more valuable for the community to hear what our recommendations are as community members as well. And so I agree with the comment, or kind of want to add on to the comment that was put into, I think someone was anonymous, and Omar answered. We're really not allowing for dialogue if we're answering just Q&As. There maybe should be a more active chat. I'm not sure if this has to do with limitations of being a webinar type Zoom, or what that limitation is, but all conversations are valuable, and I think a lot of people have really great comments, and there have been many times where I'm looking at the chat or the Q&A piece, and I want to agree with people and what they're saying, and we're not able to do that. And so it feels like some people give a recommendation, and then we kind of move on from them, and they might feel like they're never going to be heard, or whatever they're doing is not or whatever they're saying is not going to be addressed in the future, which is not the case, right? I think that right now everyone is taking notes, and we're going to put what the community is saying into the recommendations, which is great, but it should, in my opinion, be more of a dialogue. And to avoid what Omar said of having a 6-hour Zoom, right, where everyone is just like having all these opinions, because, you know, they're all valid. I think, you know, breaking it up into sections or topics would be valuable. That way, everyone can kind of get their topics on one thing. That Zoom ends, and then, you know, the next day we can talk about something else. And you know, I don't know how special meetings or how it works with the village, but if the trustees don't want to be there, I don't know if that's necessary. I mean, the community still, I feel like they still need a place or somewhere where they can contribute and really have open and honest conversations about their comments on the draft or just recommendations that they have for the reform. And then when it comes to ICE and the comments for ICE, I feel like it's not only that we need to get the chief to, I forget what wording you used, Rika, but I think, you know, there are many questions that the chief needs to answer in terms of what can he actually do, or what can the police actually do when they arrive or when ICE is around, right? If they're really just there to observe and they can't really do anything. However, them just being there is harming the community because it harms how everyone's looking at them. Is it really valuable for them to be there? That's one question. And then second, who is it more valuable to be there? Maybe we need a crisis intervention team that can be observing. And that way we're not putting the police image at harm. We're no longer saying that the police is collaborating with ICE, and we have a crisis intervention team who is there in the best interest of the community member. And we can adopt different strategies that our neighboring communities have, such as Croton Police Department, when they find out that ICE is coming to town, because usually it seems like ICE does notify the police departments, because police chiefs and from other cities too have said, you know, we don't like it when you ICE just come in and don't let us know. What the chief of police and any police officer can do, and they have the right to do, is let the community know. Croton Police Department will put on Facebook, hey, ICE is coming to town. And so that seems more of a community approach, where now as a resident or as a community member, I feel more comfortable because I know that the police has my back. And so those are just a few comments, and, you know, maybe we can act on them, because I think we still have a little bit more time to get the community involved.
Okay, thank you, Maita. I think I hear what you're saying about involved, but that actually having this come up as an issue is something that we are going to look at. That actually is the entire purpose here. And I think that we've heard loud and clear that this is a major issue, which is why also Richard did put it as one of the main issues when he synthesized as much as he could about dialogue. We're going to keep working on that. It's this issue. It's issues that affect everyone. So we're hearing you loud and clear, and we will regroup and then think about it and figure out what we can do. I hope that helps. And I know how hard you've been working on this and some of the information that you've gotten as well. I think there's another person, Jamie.
There are no more people that have raised their hand. I also want to bring attention to we are half an hour over our 90 minutes. So if you want to, Ro just, which I'm assuming it's Ro, but do we want to just take this last comment from Ro, since he just raised his hand, and then not take any more hands raised and just address what's in the Q&A and let anyone email us from here forward? Or do we want to continue the meeting forward?
Well, let's take Rose. I want to finish the chat, and then I'll give everybody a couple of minutes. You know, my belief in the board being a team. So
no problem.
We'll give it a minute or two, and I appreciate the staff also staying, and Stuart. But let's, you know, it's our first one too, so we're also going to take some of the learnings, bring it to the next one. So let's see
I'll bring over
where
Ro
we
now.
go with this, okay?
Wonderful. Thank you, Mayor.
Hello, Ro, are you on? Oh,
I am.
there you
Also,
are.
a reminder
Hello.
to give us your relationship to Austin. We know who you are, but for the rest of the group. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jamie. My name is Rodolfo Moran, Ro Moran, and I am a village resident. I'm also a member of the working committee. And thank you for your time, and thank you for your comments on this. I have to be 100% frank with you that, you know, this process, like I think it has been for every single village and every single municipality that has a local police department, has been a big undertaking, right? And it's been a little difficult to do, as you get lots of different stakeholders involved, a lot of different opinions involved, et cetera, et cetera. One thing that I would like to clarify, and I think it's so important, is, you know, as the working committee, we made our recommendations, we said our piece, but we're still learning more. And because this was such an expedited process, et cetera, we're still learning more from the community. And a lot of people are things that people really feel should be in this plan. So I know earlier it sounded, Mayor Levin, like you said, okay, yeah, you know, the working committee is done. Now it's us. But the working committee still wants to be involved. And I think that that's something really important, because as we have done this, we've established some relationships with community members who feel like they can share with us and feel that they can let us know. So we want to be able to add, edit, etc., as we hear ideas into this plan. So I'd like to know a little bit more from the VBOT as to what your thoughts are on this, on how this can be done and executed, where we're still able to assist and not step on toes, et cetera, et cetera.
If I can chime in to start, and then please,
sure, go ahead.
And, others add on to it. So this will be an inelegant metaphor, I will name out front, but nevertheless, I think one that could work. If you're familiar with the way that finances work, organizations or individuals, this is usually actually an organizational thing, have to close their books at a certain date. For some, it's December 31st. For some, it's June 30th, to say the fiscal year 2021 closes on June 30th, and you close your books then. That doesn't mean that you stop spending money as an organization. It just means that the next set of books opens 21-22 on July 1st. Similarly, we have a very prescribed, specific deadline of April 1st. And that's when we have to close the books on this one plan, but that just opens the books till the next chapter of this work. And I am eager to hear the recommendations from the working committee, from members of the community that have come forward as individuals or as groups, institutions, to not only improve our police department, but any part of our village. We are always eager to hear those recommendations and wanting to implement them. This plan is a response to a very specific request from the governor, and we are holding ourselves accountable to that timeline. So there has to be a point at which we close the books as such, but that doesn't mean that the work doesn't keep going. So I encourage you to please continue getting together, giving us your recommendations, keeping the work going, despite the fact that there is a point where we're going to have to say, no more comments for this plan. Let's keep the work going after this.
Sorry, Omar, I don't think that was exactly my question, though. And I completely understand that, but I feel that between now and, let's say, if it's due April 1st, let's say March 24th, when you know, because Matrix has to put all this together and make sure it's this beautiful document. But between that timeline is, I think, when it's important to have this committee that's been out and involved and talking to people really involved. You know, I know that there's a timeline of April 1st, but then, you know, I also want to make sure that we don't have other random timelines that we've created that are gonna give us the inability, give other people an ability to share things that are really important. Because as we've learned today, a lot of the opinions that we've heard today, a lot of the things that we've heard today are not exactly a lot of the things that we may have heard when the plan came out, just because new knowledge has come to light, et cetera, et cetera. And that's really important to note as well.
Got it. Okay. So I think one piece that I would add in terms of timing. So this is the public comment period now that we have in through February, where we're going to be taking comments from certainly members of the public during this forum, but anything else that comes up. And so you emailed the board, for example, about a specific question that you had. Was this considered? Can I get a copy of this document, et cetera, et cetera? Certainly that can continue, and all that will be taken into consideration and put into the plan by matrix. I think one of the questions that was asked in the chat recently was from the Board of Education member, Diana Lemon. I asked a few questions here at the end, but one of the general themes is the board going to have communication with the Board of Education as to how these recommendations impact the youth in our community? To me, that gets to one of the answers that we gave earlier of how feasible are all of these different recommendations? What are the lenses that we're looking at them through? So this, the Board of Education lens, is one that at this point actually has not come up specifically in terms of how we're evaluating this plan. A great recommendation from Trustee Lemon and a few other questions as well. But that's the kind of thing, Ro, that we need to have a date by which we say, these are the recommendations. Now let's evaluate feasibility, and we need time to do that, and then have a final plan and then submit, right? So that's why we're establishing some sort of date that we're saying this is when all feedback needs to come in by, but we're eager to have recommendations keep rolling in.
Thank you, Omar.
This is, to be clear, one of the big topics that the board individually and as a group has been discussing. It is a challenge for all of our initiatives, whether it's housing that we are in the process of going through and a whole bunch of other things. This is a top priority, but it's the scope, the depth, and the breadth of how one manages something that has a timeline, not established by us, by the way, established outside of our realm. And I want to make it clear that I think the metaphor of a book, whether it's in chapters and that it one chapter closes, another one opens, is very appropriate. We never thought that this was something that in and of itself comes, it's to an end, it's iterative, but we do have to hit some marks in order for the board as well to have an opportunity in a public forum to discuss amongst ourselves and to vote on what we want to move forward, what we might want to put on a longer horizon, and what we may want to agree that we do not put forward. And we need also the time as a group to have that conversation, because I'm going to tell you, we're not going to all agree on everything. And we may need information that we need to gather. And we've been doing that slightly on a parallel path, but that's part of the process as well. And you need the process in order to have closure and completion on one chapter in order to then move on to the next. And I think that Trustee Lopez had said it for all of us. I'm not seeing anybody else looking at this. And I appreciate the involvement that the committee has. Honestly, there are probably people that aren't on the committee that would like to step up and be on a committee and say, now it's our turn. Like, I'd like to be on the committee, and how many people are you going to have on the next one? These are all things that have come to our attention. We will have more things come to our attention, and those things we're going to have to synthesize and go through a process. Publicly, it says this is what we're doing next. And I appreciate that people are enthusiastic about this. We don't get enthusiasm on every committee we have. So we are not only eager to hear, but we're also excited that people want to have a say in this and want to be helpful in all of this. So thank you for that. I'm trying to read to see what else is on here that. So Omar, I think you answered Diana Lemon's question, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Trying to see if there's anything on here that is not duplicative of what's already been asked, so we're not repeating ourselves. Since this is recorded, people can look at it as well. What am I missing? Somebody just started saying something. Ro, are you still on? Were you saying something, or
I think you guys didn't unmute me. Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, that's okay.
Again.
I just wanted to know if you were saying something there.
Sorry about that. I took him out.
That's okay.
I apologize.
No, that's fine. I just didn't know if there was another comment being made. Anybody else? Yes, I know it's 12:04. We're over 2 hours into this. We do try to be respectful of people's time, although it's an engaging conversation. So I think that works.
If I may make a recommendation, Mayor.
Please.
So because we have a number of questions in
Yep.
the chat, more than likely we'll get time to answer. I want to name that we're going to memorialize all of the questions in the chat. They're going to be in the transcript that's going to follow this meeting, just like all the questions answered asked in during the meeting. So if your question was not answered directly during the meeting, it will be tracked in the future.
Okay. Thank you. And we will put that on and we'll start collecting some common questions. I'd like to bring this particular engagement to an end by thanking all that have come. At some points there were over 50 people, and people have come on off, which means it's probably more than 50 people that are seeing this. I encourage you to share this with friends, families, colleagues, residents, etc. That will allow us to have more input for members of our community. I want to thank everybody that's on the call. The entire board was here. Village Manager de Torre, Richard Brady from Matrix, Stuart Gahan, also our attorney, because there is a pattern and a process here. Everybody on the working committee, there were about 18 people on the committee. So I want mostly made up of residents, and then 2 or 3 people from staff and a couple of mayor and trustee. So I want to thank everybody for your time. This is not an end. You've got the emails, everything's on the website. Write to us, copy people. We are in some ways excited, and other ways really, I think, looking at this issue as being a century-plus issue of how police and communities interact with one another, how the police protect and serve a community, keep it safe in the form of community policing, and how a village of our size fits into that overall picture on behalf of our residents. I'm not sure that the few months that we've looked at it is going to resolve a century-plus problem in the United States, and I'm sure in other countries, but nobody elected me to be involved in other countries' issues, and specific to the village. So I found this amazingly helpful. I've taken pages of notes, even though I've sat on most of these meetings. I appreciate Matrix's work in doing what's difficult, which is trying to bring lots and lots and lots of conversations into scope in a way that's digestible for everybody. And the people who have recently joined this initiative and are giving us new ideas and new things to think about. And I do hope that everybody got a lot out of this, or what they expected, and that it met your needs. And that's it for us for today. I'm going to just do the gallery. I feel like I'm on, the Brady Bunch or something. The gallery here about if anybody has last comments, or close this meeting and wait to hear from everyone involved. Dana, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I'd just like to thank everybody for a great conversation. I know we couldn't get to everything, but we will. And I still have questions as well, and some things that haven't come up that I'd like to talk about at some point. So anyway, I'm honored to be part of this process. I just hope I can rise to the occasion and do the work that's required. I think I can. I think we all can. And I've been looking actually at some of the reports that have come out from other communities, just for context. And some of them are they're very different communities, demographically, population-wise. So their reports are very different. And in some ways, very simple and uncomplicated. I'm like, wow. But we have complex issues to work through. And I'm just glad that we can do it through this conversation. So I'm looking forward to the next ones.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, if I may, Mayor. So I definitely want to thank everyone everyone that actually participated in this, and everyone in the working committee that has put a lot of time on this, and we want to take it to the next level. I just want to say a couple of things in here. and I'm sure this was said before in the working committee, one of the things that, I can emphasize on this, because I've been in the process and I've been involved in village government for a few years now, is that, and not to put the amount of work that has been done and not to minimize the stuff that we need to look, because I think it's essential for us to improve ourselves every single day. Not to me, I try to do that every day in my personal life and in my professional life. And I think we can all do that. And this is one item that we want to improve our police department. So what that means. What is interesting though, is that a lot of the implementations or a lot of the recommendations or some of the ideas that have been coming in that I've been seeing in other municipalities, our police department already has done it in years back. Body cameras, civilian complaint review boards, community engagements in different levels. I was talking to someone from Westchester County yesterday, and we were just going over some of the stuff because I just working relationships with them. And he said, and I mentioned that I was going to be a part of this call this morning, and I said, yeah, we have to do this. We're going to do this. We're going through some of the stuff. He's like, yeah. And then I was going over the list of the stuff that we already have done. And he's like, what do you mean? You already have a civilian complaint review board in place. He's like, he thought that we are putting that in place now. I said, no, we've been having this version of that. I said, definitely this stuff that we need to improve. And part of the recommendations are that. But a lot of people in other communities don't have what we have. Again, so we want to take what we already have and improve those things. So I want to take a time to thank everyone that was involved in our process. And I want to thank the community for being involved in this. And I'm here to put, again, there's a balance. Some of the questions we're talking about, what is the budget? What is this going to cost? Do we need to hire more police officers? Other questions were, we need to reduce the amount of police officers that we have. So all these things that we need to put in perspective and see what that looks like. So some of the questions we may not be able to answer today or tomorrow or next week, because we may not have those answers right now. So just keep that in mind, that this is a working process. We do have, I like the analysis that my colleague Omar Lopez said, closing the books, but that doesn't mean that the work is done at that time. Definitely the next chapter comes in, and what does that look like? And we want the community to be involved on any level, not just for this. We want the community to get involved on every single aspect that village government does. And what does that look like? So we have this committee now. We have the comprehensive plan coming up. We've been having discussions about the downtown parking, all these initiatives that we are working now. And those are to better our community. So that's what I'm asking is, please stay involved. Stay involved as an individual, stay involved as a group, stay involved as a voice for our community that you feel that is not being heard. Just, BOT at villageofaustin.org. You can email it to all of us, or like it was mentioned before, to individual. Just, again, the involvement in the community is, to me, is greatly appreciated. So thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Quezada. Anybody else before we leave the meeting? I'm sorry, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just real quick. Again, thank you for everybody that took the time today to get involved. I'm in this position because I want to serve my community, and this is a very important thing for us. And we all are here. And I echo my colleagues' comments. I'm not going to repeat things, but please believe I'm in this position to serve you guys, and that's why I'm here. And we're going to put our best foot forward, and we're going to take everything and all our information and put together a good plan. So the last thing I'd like to say is I'd like to thank Jamie Hoffman for orchestrating our Hollywood Squares today, and I will let it go with that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Hollywood Squares, I forgot that one.
Or the Brady
Thanks.
Bunch. There's only 9 on the screen, so.
Yeah, I know. That's right. Great. Omar's got his mute on, so he may not want to speak, although I think that he and I have spoken quite a bit on behalf of the board today. I thank everyone for participating, and we will hopefully see many of you and more of you on the next one. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of the weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.